So Marshall Hamilton, thank you for joining us, and sorry it took so long to get to you and your thoughts. How are you?
Awesome.
Good. Are the Riders a contender? Are they for real?
I think I said last week that they were in the top three, and I still feel they're in the top three. They might even be in the top two if they get home field advantage against Calgary in the Western Final. I still think Calgary, it's going to come down to Calgary, Saskatchewan, whether it's in that order or not in the West, and it's going to come down to Hamilton and Hamilton in the East. I mean, Hamilton, in my opinion, is the favorite in the entire Canadian Football League. I said this at the end of the Jeff Fairholm interview. If it does turn out to be Saskatchewan against Hamilton in the Grey Cup, it is two second-string quarterbacks. And I don't mean that to be slightful of either player, but those are not the quarterbacks that started the season. Those are not the quarterbacks that were starting for their respective teams on the first game of the year between those two teams. It was Jeremiah Masoli and Zach Collaros. So both of those teams have kind of risen from the adversity of, in the case of Saskatchewan, game one where they lost Collaros, and it was probably about game 5 or 6 when they lost Masoli. But wow, I mean, you couldn't go far wrong. I mean, I think Brandon Banks is going to be the MVP coming out of, or the MOP coming out of the East. But you couldn't go wrong by picking those two quarterbacks, Cody Fajardo from the West and Dane Evans from the East, as the two competing MOP candidates from their respective. So I think it's going to boil down to either Calgary, Saskatchewan in the West and Hamilton in the East.
It's funny, I read an article today. Actually, I posted it to our website, rodpedersen.com, saying that Brandon Banks has ended any conversation about who should be MOP in the league this year. And you didn't even mention him. And I'm with you that it should be those guys. I know Banks has been great, but would there be a Brandon Banks without Dane Evans? I don't think so. I understand it's a team game.
And if I
see where I'm going with that?
And if I was to pick a coordinator of the year, to be Tommy Condell, who's helped make Banks what Banks is, who's helped make Dane Evans what he is. Tommy Condell, I've used this metaphor before. Watching that Hamilton Tiger Cat offense, it's a lot like the Kansas City offense down in the NFL, where you've got these 3 cups and there's a ball into one of these 3 cups and the magician is going like this, and you got to try to figure out which cup is the ball under. That's the way they are. I mean, as a defensive back or as a linebacker, and you're watching the ball get snapped, and then you're just watching all these people go in different directions, and the ball is flipping and flopping and faking, and you don't know where that ball is. And as a defender, that gives them at least a one-step advantage over you, who is trying to cover them or tackle them. So Tommy Condell, as the offensive coordinator in Hamilton, deserves sort of the coordinator of the year. There isn't a trophy for that. But Brandon Banks should win it. Brandon Banks will probably win it for the league. But Dane Evans is certainly a 1A, 1B in Hamilton, and Cody Fajardo deserves to be. And I don't say this because I'm a Rider fan. I say this because you look at who has had the biggest influence on their team in 2019 in the Western Conference, and I don't know how you can pick anybody other than Cody Fajardo.
Stephen Sawchuk is watching from Winnipeg this morning and says, don't count out the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I'm with you. And it's funny because I put Mike O'Shea in the Coach of the Year conversation in my weekend column, 10 Things, and people are going, how do you have O'Shea in there? You guys were writing him off a couple of weeks ago. Well, that's what we do. The ESPN's got the Cleveland Browns written off. What are they, 2-5? Mm-hmm. And this morning I'm watching ESPN and it says Kitchens over his head. They win this week. It'll be Kitchens, Coach of the Year candidate. That's what we do. So you guys worry about your thing. We'll do what we do. Winnipeg is back in the conversation, and it's all because of Zach Collaros. And by the way, the poll results last I saw, 80 to 90% of our respondents on the Capital Auto Mall Universal Collision Center poll say Zach Collaros should start in the playoffs for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And if he does, gents, they are a weapon. And that could say, move aside, Cody Fajardo. This is the story of the year. Mm-hmm. If Zach Collaros...
It's a fantastic story. Yeah. And even though he doesn't play for the Riders anymore, what a feel-good story that was. I mean, I just loved watching that football game, and I loved watching the outcome because it favored Saskatchewan, or Saskatchewan's chances to finish first. But to see to see Zach Collaros come in, play as well as he did, and in particular to take 2 really solid hits and bounce right up after those hits, that made me feel good, because I'm not the only one for sure, but there's a lot of us that were really concerned that it was going to take one more hit and then his career is over, and maybe more than that. So I'm really pleased to see how well he played, really pleased to see that he bounced up from those 2 hits. And yeah, they're a contender. I mean, I didn't mention them in my list, but I could list all of the 6 teams that are going to be in the playoffs, because Montreal's a good football team as well. Edmonton, I don't think's got a chance, but with Collaros, if Collaros can continue to bounce back as he has, that's a really good football team. I wouldn't vote for O'Shea for Coach of the Year. I think
Not yet, but if they win the Grey Cup, you might.
No, I wouldn't.
You've been the Bombers' biggest fan the last 2 years. Don't stop now.
No. Yeah, but you're mixing topics.
Well, no.
I thought the Bombers were the best team on day one. I thought they were the best team on
now.
Sort of week 4, week 5. But they started to unravel. I think I said this on last week's program. They started to unravel about midway through the season. It was a combination of, in no particular order, the loss of Nichols at quarterback, the steroid scandal, so to speak, for Trevor Harris, some of the decisions that were being made by the coaching staff, in particular Mike O'Shea. I'm a Mike O'Shea fan, but this year has not been a good year for Mike O'Shea. It's been one of those really seesaw years for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but the season's not over yet.
No, I know, and I agree with you. I mean, I have had, honestly, a lot of faith in Mike O'Shea, but this is what I don't understand the last couple of weeks. You're in Calgary with a chance to win a game, Winnipeg, and you've got Collaros sitting there, Streveler's hurt, and you put in McGuire, not Zach, and then you have McGuire only in for one series, then you put Streveler back in?
Well, that's an example.
What do you guys, but that's bad coaching, sorry.
Exactly. That's an example of the kind of things that I say that takes him out of my category. Plus,
fair.
How do you pick Mike O'Shea over Orlando Steinauer, who's had a fantastic year of coaching, over Craig Dickinson, who's had a fantastic year of coaching, and probably who I think should be one of the favorites, although I don't think he'll win, but Kahari Jones in Montreal, that took a train wreck, a dumpster fire, and turned them into a playoff contender and a team that could, on any given day, beat any one of those other teams. Those are my top 3 candidates for Coach of the Year.
Steinauer, Jones, Dickinson. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you said Jones, I had a bit of a shiver.
You had to think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, which, by the way,
because of our bet earlier this year, you said that
Jones will be an NFL head coach at some point
in 7 years. I think you qualified.
Didn't I say
it
for the
later.
rest of his life?
Well, I know.
I thought it was open-ended, but
so did I.
But that's a dangerous thing to get into, because I was talking with the lawyer last night. We were talking about
why were you talking to our lawyer?
We were talking about payments and paying people back and things, and he's like, one of the terms, at a later date. He's like, that's dangerous. Don't put that in the clause, because 7 years from now, I need that money back. Well, you said at a later date. There's always a later date. So that open-endedness, I mean, he could be 90 years old. There's still a chance. I
thought he was going to advise us against betting on air.
Nope, not at all.
No.
Maybe we erred. Maybe we should have had 2 polls going today, because the sports doctor has written in and says Andrew Harris should be in the most outstanding player race. Last year's Super Bowl MVP was Julian Edelman, who served a 4-game PED suspension earlier in the same season. What are you going like this
Different. Completely different. I believe Andrew Harris could be the most outstanding player, the MVP of the Grey Cup, but not the MOP of the season. That's different. Because if you're playing in the game, you should be allowed to. Of course, you can win the awards for playing in the game. But on the season, I think the integrity that Darren Bombing brought up yesterday in his voting, I think that's important.
Yeah, it's an apple and an orange. I agree with you.
The prompter here says, a note from Clark, Rod, can you give a shout out to Tracy Karst? He watches every day. He's a P1. Which is a Priority 1 viewer, and I saw Tracy writing in earlier and saying that he's watching with his dad, so good morning to Tracy and his dad. But I think, not like they're ever going to listen to us, but it would be a great poll question is, should he be eligible for most outstanding player? Sounds like he's going to be, because the ballots have already gone out, and this is usually the week they're announcing the most outstanding players.
Yeah, here's my answer. He should be eligible. But if I'm a voter, and I'm not going to vote for him, because I want to send a message. I know I'm not a voter, but if there's 100 voters, I want each of those 100 voters to send him a message that, yes, you had a great season, but it's tainted.
Yeah.
Agreed. And as a result, you're not going to be my selection.
You're watching Rod Pedersen on demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.